wise words, we grow richer and richer. So thank you for being here, Juergen and Urvashi Butalia.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, which is going to talk about whether we have too many books and too little time to read them. I'm delighted to be in conversation with Juergen, who I've known for a long time and who is a man of many parts. Juergen is the director of the biggest international book fair in the world, the Frankfurt Book Fair. But he's also has a past as a publisher. He's worked with different kinds of publishers, scientific and technical publishers, also trade publishing, and he brings all that knowledge to the book fair, which I will leave Juergen to tell you the statistics of how many publishers attend, how many visitors come, how many rights are sold, all of those things. And our discussion really will look at, I guess, the future of books. Are we optimistic about it? Is this a troubled future? What is going to happen? So we'll make some speculative statements as well. And I'm going to start, Juergen, by asking you the first question, which is the basis of this panel. Are there too many books? Is there too little time? Are those two things related?
Good afternoon. It really... that's a question whom you ask about that. Yeah, if you ask me, there can never be enough books. If you would ask publishers in Germany, they would say, oh, we have way too many books in the market. And actually, we are not as successful as we used to be. If you look into self-publishing, you're seeing there can never be enough books because everybody is a writer, obviously.
Everybody wants to write. But do you have, say from Germany, which is a country which collects actually quite a lot of quantitative data on and qualitative data on reading patterns, on book patterns. So do you have any studies that actually tell you whether the numbers of books are reducing or increasing, and whether people are reading less or more? Do they have time? Do you have any kind of information like that?
Yeah, Germany is a very saturated market, actually. And I think we have one of the best functioning book markets in the world. So our publisher association has done some research over the past 10 years. And one study is saying that we lost, like Germany does have 80 million people. And the study was saying that we lost 6 million readers in this 10 years' time. Mm-hmm. And but actually, if you look into the numbers, you're seeing that we obviously lost the readers, but we're selling the same amount of titles into the market. So there seems to be a gap. So some people seem to read a lot more. Yeah. And on the other hand, we are seeing that, that's the title of our discussion, we are seeing that people have to spend time on television, they're using Netflix, they have their smartphones, there's audiobooks getting, streaming of audiobooks getting more and more important, and the day only has 24 hours. So how do you spend your time, really?
So you're saying time is reducing?
There's time in Germany, it's an issue, and it's demographics is an issue. We are a country which is overaging, actually. It's very different if you look into other countries, like, by example, Indonesia or Brazil, young countries with a large population. They really see that that the book markets are very successful.
Okay, and in terms of publishers who, say, for example, attend the Frankfurt Book Fair, are you finding that the trade in books across the world is still as healthy as it used to be, or is that changing? Is that any indication?
Yeah, I didn't want to make any promotion for Frankfurt, but actually Frankfurter Buchmesse, the Frankfurt Book Fair, was the first book fair in the world. Yeah, it started more than 500 years ago. There's a very long experience. I'm with the book fair now for 12 years, and I've seen the book fair reinvent itself every 3 years. Yeah, we went through the threat of digital books, where everybody asked me, is the book going to die? Is it going to be replaced by digital media, which has not happened? And in the past few years, we've seen an even stronger internationalization. When I started, we had like 60% out of more than 7,000 exhibitors, publishers in Frankfurt were German. And now it's 40%, so it's vice versa. And it's people from 150 countries coming. And the questions 5 years ago, oh, now we have email and we can be in touch with everybody and we have social media. We don't have to meet anymore, and that's not true. Actually, you have to meet at least once a year, because our industry is a small industry, but we need to know each other to understand what kind of titles are interesting, what kind of authors are out there in the market, and we need to build up trust. I think our industry, publishing, book industry, does rely on trust, and you have to build trust, you have to see each other.
Jürgen, one of the things about books, the received wisdom, which actually I think is the truth of book publishing and book writing, is that publishers are the ones who curate the lists that they publish. So from the wealth of material that a range of writers might be writing, you use certain criteria to select. And those could be based on content, on marketability, on the writer's reputation, on the topicality of the issue, a whole range of things. And then it is that select list that you actually put out into the market. And therefore, publishing carries with it a certain kind of weight. You know, that these books have been through a process, somebody has judged them within quotes objectively, and so on and so forth. With the democratization, if you like, of many publishing platforms, not only the book publishing platform, but the fact that everyone can put content out in any particular form that they want, and it need not be mediated through a third person. Do you think that that has in some ways contributed to perhaps giving the physical book less importance and the possibility of having multiple voices heard? Is that impacted in some way on the weight that was given to books? So that maybe what I'm leading up to is people may not necessarily be reading full books, but it's not that they're not reading, they're reading.
Yes, I do believe people do read a lot more than has ever been read before, because you have so many different media, you have so many different types of information, ranging from fake news to 1,000 pages or maybe 7,000 pages of Karl Ove Knausgaard's, where he reflects on his life over 7 volumes. So you have all type of books, information, entertainment out there. And you started off with the role of the editor and the self-publishing, yeah? So now it's very easy actually to publish your own book. And some of these popular authors do have a huge followership, but the interesting thing, it's mostly about romance, it's very much entertainment. And coming back to the role of the editor or the publisher, I think it's even more important, yeah, because you have, as you mentioned, a quality function and you are a curator. Yeah, somebody has actually to screen all this content out there. And he has to decide, I want to reach this and this reader. My readers, people who do buy my publishing house's books, I want him to be like this and this. They might be interested in this and this, so I have to search for content which is appropriate for my readers. So the curation is a lot more important. But the curation also means that I, as a publisher or an editor, have to decide in which channel I want to go. Yeah, I can use a blog, I can use a printed book, and I can have an e-book, I can do audio streaming, I can use any kind of social media. So this is also a function of a publisher, to choose the appropriate channel. Yeah, if you think of STM, scientific, technical, medical literature, 100% of it is available digital. Yeah. On the other hand, when I personally want to read a novel, I would read it on paper.
But if you wanted to refer to, say, some medical knowledge, you would now no longer consult a reference book? Would you go onto the net and look it up?
Actually, I would go onto the net and look it up where I would find it, but then the net would show me the way to quality content about that. I would never believe what I've read in Wikipedia or anywhere else, especially with scientific content. No, I would still go to content which is approved and peer-reviewed by one of the big STM publishers or a small STM publisher, it doesn't matter. And I've seen Peter Wiley running around here. Peter is one of the owners of John Wiley & Sons, one of the largest STM publishers in the world. And I think it's quite interesting that he's coming here to Jaipur to also get in touch with the readers.
Actually, this, of course, is one great affirmation of the fact that people are still interested in books and they're still reading, because pretty much all the discussions that we have here are about books and about writers, really. But let me come back to the original question of too little time. So, do you think actually publishers, editors, you yourself as a book person, have you seen any change in your reading patterns?
Yeah, I've seen some changes, what you said. If it's about information, I would always go digital. Yeah, if I read a novel or poems, it would always be on paper. So I have to decide which medium I want for which kind of sort of reading. What I actually do see, I have an 18-year-old son, and it was quite difficult for me to bring him to reading, yeah, because he really spent most of his time in front of the computer watching Netflix or whatever, yeah. So I had to accept that his way to get entertained and to learn was something had to do with moving images. And now he's 18 and suddenly he starts reading on paper, and he prefers reading on paper. So it seems that it's not like, it's a different phase, yeah? You first go through digital media, and where you actually get hooked onto content, onto storytelling, and then you're with the book.
Okay, so bringing people back to reading is a big challenge. Or back to reading
books. To get them reading, actually, to get them reading. The younger ones, to get the younger ones reading. Yeah.
And how is that happening across the world? So let me give you an example. Years ago, I came across this thing that in Japan, the newspaper companies had started certain reading clubs where young children were given books to read, which they would then review, and these would be published in the newspapers. But the awards also for encouraging them to read and the involvement went to their parents, who were given certain incentives to get kids reading, which sort of worked with parents reading, children reading. We don't have anything like that here. But are there things like that happening across the world to nourish the reading habit, if one can use that word?
Actually, the best thing is always a good example, yeah? So if the parents do read, the children will read as well. But if the parents don't find time, then we're quite difficult, yeah? So it's also a middle class issue, it's a class issue, yeah? If the people are hooked onto books, the children will also be. If they are not, so it's quite difficult to get them reading. We have an initiative actually in Germany, and which is called Soccer Meets Culture, yeah? Where we have young children starting from the age of 7, and they are allowed to play soccer with a youth trainer of a first league team. And then they have another hour after the training having fun reading. So we try to combine something which is obviously very attractive. We combine it with the idea of reading. And our experience now, we have 15 first league teams, and every year we have like 700-800 kids going through this. That they, after a certain time, they have more fun with the reading than they have playing soccer. And the nice idea when we started it, we had a team in Berlin, and I went there, and it was all little girls wearing with an Arabic background, wearing their scarves, yeah, and playing soccer, and this was so nice to see then, and all of these, and they could see them coming back, and you could really see. So we can only reach a few thousand kids, but at least we reach these, and I think they will be with the book for the years to come.
Yeah, I think what we're really talking about is the thirst for knowledge. This morning's keynote address by the Nobel laureate, who everyone calls him Venki affectionately, really talked about the importance of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge. Now, I was thinking back to when the question I asked you about your reading patterns, I was thinking back to my own reading patterns, and I'm a publisher and occasional writer. I work with books all the time, but I also find that I read much less than I used to read because of this shortage, all the pressures on time. But when you actually find a book and start reading it and read it from start to finish, and when you're caught by that romance of wanting to rush back home to read the book because you're actually in that story, which happens so rarely, there's nothing more satisfying than that. And I don't find that reading on a Kindle.
But what keeps you from reading, Urvashi?
Time.
Is it time?
I think
there are more things to do than in the past. You've done so many things in your life, started several publishing houses, being an author yourself, being a journalist, whatever.
I know, but just thinking of, okay, so I'm publishing, I read manuscripts. So I think of, okay, I have to finish reading these manuscripts so that I can get back to the author, so I can't really read for my pleasure. But it's also time. It is time. It doesn't keep you from reading.
No, I'm actually in the lucky situation that I have to sit on planes all the time.
Okay.
And what can you do on a plane? And getting here, it took me like hours, and I was able to read 2 books. So that's I'm in the lucky situation.
Over? That's pretty amazing. 2 books on a flight is, you must be a fast reader.
I'm a very fast reader, but as you, I've been in publishing all my life. So.
Yeah, so you get to learn that. Let me ask you another question. So these days, people are talking so much about the act of creating like a formula book and of using the net and digital technology to look at certain algorithms and then to try and create something that will sell, that will fit certain patterns. We talk about it as something that the digital world has presented to us, but it's not really so much that, because formula fiction or formula writing been around for a long time. Mills and Boon romances had a very strict formula of, even to the extent of how many inches taller the man must be, what color hair he must have, the bad woman must have dark hair, the good woman must have blonde hair and blue eyes, and so on. So it's not as if it hasn't been around. But today there's a lot of talk about the creativity of the writer getting killed because of the possibilities that the machine offers. What would you say to that?
Yeah, as you said, these efforts have been around for a long time, and they have been before the digital age already, because you had a formula how to write a book, so at least it will find some readers, but this is not literature. This is not what we are talking about. Yeah, this is fast food, and fast food is prepared after a certain formula. This is convenience food. We are talking about literature, something which is challenging you, and this is not what a machine can do. And actually, I've never seen any machine, artificial intelligence, who can predict the success of a book. Yeah, I've been traveling in last year. To Korea, talking to people who were already using artificial intelligence to judge a manuscript, the work you're doing. Yeah, and there was one publisher, educational publisher, and they said, we're getting like 70,000 manuscripts. So we use artificial intelligence actually first to read these, and then we can decide which one we actually want to work on, or which get awarded. And I think this is quite a stupid idea, because you can only judged by certain criteria. And when you talk about big data, formulating success of a book, I've never seen. How do you predict the trend? To predict the trend, I think it's not quantitative information, it's qualitative information. And the best thing is you talk to a lot of readers. What's happening here, I think that's why a lot of authors here come to the festival, so they're in touch with their readers and to get new ideas. Yeah, and you would never expect the trends, and we had the very autobiographical literature in the past few years. Then in Germany we had a trend, everybody who wrote about the forests or mushrooms or something became a success. But this is something which lasts for 3 years and then it goes away, and no machine could ever predict that.
I'm interested that you say that this is the fast food. That's an interesting comparison to make.
But sometimes it's fun to eat fast food. It's not that.
Sometimes it's fun to eat fast food. But, okay, fast food can have also, if you eat too much of it, long-term consequences. But one of the things that I think is happening, and I'm just speculating, putting it in front of you, the books that we might call not literature, but they may be mass market, popular, fast food, whatever we call them, they are in many ways also instrumental in creating readership. So in a sense, we can't really dismiss or devalue them. And I'll give you an example of from my own experience of this, which really took me aback, but also made me rethink. And I have a 75-year-old aunt, or maybe she's a little closer to 80, who's never read a book in her life. And then one day in her daughter-in-law's home, she was there, she had time to spend, she found a copy of one of our potboiler fast food type of books, which is based on Hindu mythology, and she started to read it, and she loved it. And she got excited by the story, and then she had to leave, get back to her own home. She left the book half read, and then she called me up and said, you know, you're in publishing, can you get me this book? And because I really loved reading it, so I was so excited, I got her all 3 books by that author, even though I don't like them at all myself. But I thought, okay, you know, at age 75, 76, you've created a new reader. That deserves really a lot of respect. So I think that is happening with a lot of young Indians, for sure. Yeah. And I'm just wondering what your feeling might be on that.
No, I'm sharing your opinion on that. Every book read is a good book, yeah, because it helps your fantasy and it stimulates you. Because every reader reads his own book, yeah. Not one person reads it the same way like another. It's always you reading it, yeah. It's near clear. It's sort of a philosophical question, actually. So so it's very important. I do read a lot of science fiction and thriller literature, which is my fast food. But actually, it's I need it. Yeah, also I couldn't live without this sort of literature. And when we are saying about the self-publishing aspect, yeah, there you get a lot of this fast food. But actually, I think even one of these authors, they are getting better with every book because they are getting feedback by the authors, and they get in direct feedback through social media where the books are available. So it's quite interesting. That's also an educational process for the author, but as well as for the reader. And the more you read, the more you're interested in other forms of literature as well. And actually what I'm seeing as well, I don't know whether you have this trend in India, poetry is coming back. A lot of more people are reading poems now, at least in some European countries, what I'm seeing. That's quite interesting.
Yes, they were saying yesterday in the discussion in the business discussions that we had with publishers, that even in India, booksellers are now asking for poetry books, which is something that traditionally publishers have been really kind of reluctant to address. So, sorry, you're going to say something?
No.
No, we are looking at a range of things that impact the act of reading and the kind of time you spend on it. We're looking at whether or not there are fewer books being published, which you're saying in the context of Germany, numbers are stable, but readers of books may be dropping, and they may be reading on other devices. So the act of reading is not disappearing, but just the devices on which they're reading is changing. And also that publishing, the value of having an editor, somebody who will curate the work, somebody who will judge it, that still remains as important, even though self-publishing is growing and growing. And from what I hear you saying is that self-published authors get a lot of feedback because of the existence of social media, and then they are sort of able to do better and better. They are improving. Yeah. And does it also happens that self-published authors then get taken up by publishers?
Yes, I think, and that's a nice idea for publishers actually, because somebody does the market testing for them. Yeah, if somebody has a success with 2 books and self-published books or 3, they usually get picked up by a traditional publishing house, and usually these self-publishers, they are very happy, yeah, to get the assistance of a publisher. We talked about the quality function, the branding, the marketing, distribution, all that what it's taken over, the curating of content, yeah. And so actually it's another way which actually does help the traditional format of publishing.
Okay, can I ask you, the whole business of publishing different books, there's a term that we use for it, and you're familiar with it, called bibliodiversity, which is something that I think something that publishers own or should own, which is that they have a responsibility to bring out all kinds of books by all kinds of people, including not only the most privileged and the most articulate voices, but a range of voices that are otherwise not heard or not known of, which means much more hard work in also trying to source manuscripts and so on and so forth, and also getting people to be receptive to those kinds of voices in order to read them. As somebody who runs an international book fair, do you, beyond the getting of publishers to take stalls and all of that, do you actually take steps to look into these acts of reading and publishing, which can ensure a diverse, inclusive environment in publishing?
Yes, we see our role as a book fair not only to provide the venue, the event, yeah, but actually we want to give some, we are part of the German Publisher Association, we are not for profit. Actually, we are here to support authors and publishers actually in their work, booksellers. And so we have to talk about literacy, what I said before, what we're doing with many different campaigns. We do offer a lot of trainings for publishers worldwide. I'm also president of a society promote literature from Africa, Asia, and Latin America, voices which usually don't get translated, where we provide translation subsidies, and where we try to find publishers for these voices, especially also under gender-related issues. Yeah, we have to look into this. Yeah? Mostly, it's male authors being translated, and we want to change this. So there are many, many activities, and actually we also try to work with a lot of institutions that, again, we look into the role of politics, of governments, that actually in Germany you see that theaters get a lot of subsidies. The film industry gets a lot of subsidies. Yeah. Book publishing, somehow, I don't know why. Yeah, and I see the same all over the world. Yeah, creative industries, as long as they create a high visibility for a politician, then you get a lot of subsidies. But this is not in our industry. But we actually have to claim same sort of support as other cultural activities.
I'm going to ask you two more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. So, the Frankfurt Book Fair has never had a woman director, right?
No. There were only, after 49, there were four directors. Yeah.
So let me ask you, of course I had to get that in, but my question to you is, publishing across the world, no matter which country we're talking about, now sees the presence of more and more women. Earlier, it used to be traditionally called a gentleman's profession. And I don't think that meant that it had only men in it, although it actually did have only men in it. But I think it also meant that you had to be from a gentlemanly elite.
You had to have some money.
And you had to have some money to get into it. All that is changing now. And you also see the presence of more and more women, and even though they may not be in charge in many places of the money part of it, but very importantly, content is something that is being thought about, chosen, selected, put out there a lot by women. Do you find, in your experience, has that changed publishing in any radical way across the world, or is that too big a question? Would you like to address it in the context of Germany?
Yeah, I never thought about this too much, but in the past few weeks I've been often asked by German media or English media about why doesn't publishing have Me Too issues? Yeah.
Why doesn't or does?
Why doesn't? I haven't seen anything right now. Like the movie industry and other creative industries already have this. And I was wondering whether it had to do that many, many women are in publishing, but on the other hand, as we talked about it before, the management is still mostly male dominated. But in Germany, what I'm seeing right now, it's actually some sort of transition. I'm seeing now more women being the managers of publishing houses, the directors, the presidents. So there's a change. But content-wise, I do not see a difference between a male or a female editor, actually. I think it's more about the quality of a book. But then again, I was wondering, we talked about it, why do actually more male authors get translated into German? Yeah. Why do more awards go towards male authors? Why do we have more male Nobel Prize winners? A lot more, 90%.
Maybe the question we should be asking is, how do we actually tackle or break patriarchy in the world of publishing? Because I think it's deeply entrenched over there, not only in the practices of who holds the power, who holds the money power especially, but also in things like when you say that you were asking the question, why is there no serious Me Too issues in publishing? My own guess would be that it's not that Me Too issues or not that issues of sexual harassment or predatory attacks, etc., do not exist. But it is that they do not easily get talked about because it must be really difficult to have mechanisms to address those. And all it needs is for that one woman to come out and speak out. And then others will start speaking out.
You think we are more secluded and...
I know. I don't know what it is. I mean, I think this is something we need to reflect on. I suspect it could also be that the world, there is a kind of mystification around the act of creating books, as if we are all engaged in a very worthwhile enterprise. And it's entirely possible that in that, thinking about raising issues which may be seen as, I use the word, marginal or not serious, in the pursuit of knowledge, collateral damage could be a bit of sexual harassment on the side, whereas in the profit-making world of filmmaking, maybe it's a more serious issue. I don't know. I'm thinking on my feet because I've not really thought about this, but I'm just wondering.
I just remember a situation. This is 25 years ago. I was working for a very literary publishing house, and I remember 2 Nobel Prize winners coming every 6 months to see my boss. And both of them always had very young university assistants traveling. And every 6 months there was a new lady. So actually, so we had some sort of Me Too. I think so, yeah.
And is there any pressure from within, let's say, publishing bodies, German Publishers Association? I know that our Publishers Association doesn't have a lot of that, but say German Publishers Association or other publishers associations, to say these are really very serious issues. And they need to be addressed not only in the level of human relationships, but also a healthy, egalitarian, respectful working environment can impact on the content that you create.
Yeah, I do believe so. In 200 years of its existence, the German Publisher Association had one a female president in 200 years. Yeah, my supervisory board after '49, when it was refounded again, had now only in the past 2 years we had one female member of the supervisory board. Yeah, after 70 years of history now, after World War II again. And I'm sure the next president of the German Publisher Association is going to be a female president. So there's a lot of awareness. But on the other side, it's now also political correctness. To appoint a male president right now, I think wouldn't be possible.
Okay, let me ask you then the other question that goes back to the title of our panel. So what in your view is the future of books? This is a question we often ask ourselves. And let me put it in another context. So if you look historically at the materials that go to make up books, from the time that books started being books, we are looking at things like leather, like animal skin, vellum really. We are looking at things like cloth. We are looking at things in countries like ours. We are looking at palm leaves and that kind of thing. All of that starts to change. One of the reasons why paper replaces vellum and cloth and other things is because it takes too many animal skins to make one book. So you have to kill too many animals to actually get enough skins to make, let's say, 200 or 300-page book. And there is a lot of suspicion of paper when paper comes in as a material that's ephemeral and won't last. Now, apart from all the issues of are there fewer readers, are reading habits changing, all of that, we also have this very deep environmental concern. Are we cutting up too many trees. And we need to cut up lots of trees, and we need lots of water to make paper, and we don't regenerate enough. So do you think, when we're looking at the future of books, should we be looking at these issues? Is it possible that environmental concerns will wipe out the physical form of the book as we know it and love it? And should we all be aware of those concerns? Or do you think other things will happen? And I can see you shaking your head. So if you think environmental concerns will not wipe out the book we know, don't you think we as publishers and consumers of books have a responsibility to the environment and to not chop up all the trees to make paper for books?
I think we do have, as publishers, we do have this responsibility. And if you look into the books, most of them you will find a little logo of that it's renewable wood which is used. On the other hand, we are using so many media. If you look on these screens, I think you can produce a lot of printed paper books with the same ecological footprint as such a screen, yeah? or our mobile phones or whatever. At this point of time, I'm seeing really paper as as a renewable product, yeah, if it's grown sustainable, yeah. So I don't think we have an economic and we don't have economic and we don't have ecological pressure right now to replace the printed book. I think it's more important, and what we talked about before, it's the idea of reading. And it's not the medium which is pushing us. Yeah? It's always, and that's why I'm thinking the book does not never go away, because we will always be interested in listening to stories, into listening to other people. And a book is only one way to listen to other voices. And we are curious. We are very, very curious. We want to know. We want to learn. We want to develop ourselves. And this is happening with the book.
Okay, so that's one aspect of it. Another aspect which you have addressed in your discussion yesterday during Bookmark, and which I'd like you to come back to in closing this panel, is the question of the danger that knowledge, or the free knowledge, free circulation of knowledge, and all kinds of knowledges which can be seen as fearful, dangerous, etc., poses to the structures of power that our world is now increasingly developing. So I'm talking about the issues, the ethical issues that lie at the heart of the act of publishing and reading and writing, which are issues to do with not only freedom of expression, freedom to publish, but are also the dangers that publishers and writers and others face from increasingly repressive regimes. Do you think that that is something that's likely to impact the existence of books or the act of reading, or is there no danger from that, or might that impact the quality and not the numbers? How would that play out?
Yeah, on the one hand, we are seeing a lot more censorship out there, not only with newspapers, not only with printed books, but also in the internet, on the one hand. And in the past 2 years, I had some issues in Frankfurt as well, where the press asked us to exclude certain publishers. They came from a right-wing background. We couldn't exclude them, so even if I don't like their political opinion, they are part of our society, so we have to allow them in. So we have a very liberal understanding, and if it's not banned or banned in Germany, then, which is very little content is banned in Germany, we have to allow them in. But there are many other countries where you actually have censorship on the one hand, or where you have exaggerated political correctness. So also you have the situation that authors do censor themselves because they are scared. And this is a big issue, yeah? I think self-censorship is the most dangerous thing we are seeing right now, and I think this is what you were reflecting on. And it's so important, but actually what I'm also seeing is the more pressure there is, the more critical the writers are going to be, and they're always finding ways to get published.
I think self-censorship is something we face here also, and a lot of publishers I know now think twice about the kinds of books that they would earlier have put out without really any worry. But the other thing also is, and this is the last part of this question that I'd like your view on, just as there is self-censorship, there is also There are a lot of questions raised by people who feel they've been wrongly represented or so on. And I'm not sure how I'm phrasing this correctly. What I want to ask you is, the act of protesting about content of books in different ways, including something like, for example, the burning of books. How would you look at that? And the reason I'm saying it is, it's a very complicated issue. We here have the history of the Dalit community burning the Manusmriti many, many years ago, this book on which a lot of Hindu law is based and which is hugely discriminatory and casteist. And that is a very empowering act to register protest. But on the other hand, when you get a right-wing protest about a liberal or left-wing book, and that book is burnt, then there seems to be something slightly different about it. What's your view on this?
Yeah, it's very difficult, yeah, because any form of censorship, whether it's coming from the right side or from the left side, whether it's politically correct or not, yeah, it's stupid. It's very stupid because you cannot limit the mind of people. Yeah, content will always, or stories will always be told. So actually, to censor sheds only the light on the people who do the censorship. Obviously, they are scared of something and this limitation. And the speaker before us, he was talking about teaching English to the Dalit. Yeah, actually, it has a lot to do with accessibility of content and translations from different languages is so important. Yeah, we have to make stories available.
And accessibility of content, books are one of the best ways to make content accessible still.
Still,
so
and the easiest way, in the most beautiful way.
Okay, so we're kind of okay on that count. Let's open it up. So wait, let's see, where is somebody with the mic? Okay, and one question there, and the lady here in front. We're going to take 3 questions first and then come for a second round. So there was a gentleman at the back. Did he get the mic? I can't even. Yeah, here, this gentleman. If you could start, and then you, and then there was somebody this side. Yeah, that person at the back with a hand up. We'll come to you, sir. Okay, keep them short, please.
Sure, ma'am. Warm good afternoon, and it was really overwhelming. And my question to you is, Sharon ma'am, to both of you, I want to hear it, your point of view on it, that in such an era of technological advancement, how important is it to retain a book, a paperback book, to inculcate this reading habit in all of us? Thank you, ma'am.
How important is it to?
Retain a book in the paperback forms.
Oh, okay, all right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, would you like to ask?
Check? Yeah. So my question is to the both of you. And we discussed about the change in reading habits from the perspective of consumers. My question to you is, because it's common knowledge that attention span of readers is decreasing by the day because of internet, technology, also digital streaming platforms. So is there a change in how writers approach writing? For instance, I was once speaking to Ravi Subramaniam, and he said that now what he's doing is he's keeping shorter chapters, and each chapter, more or less, or every alternate chapter ends with a cliffhanger. So the reader is forced to pick up the next chapter. Is there a change in how authors write?
Okay, and there was a third person here who had a hand up. Have you got the mic? Yeah, at the back. We'll take you in the next round, okay? Please speak. You've got the mic. What's happening?
Hello. My question is, currently and even in future, how are the consumption pattern and trends are changing with respect to unconventional book formats like graphic novels, audiobooks, and even regional literature and translations?
So where do we start? With the paperbacks. Maybe let's start with the printed paperbacks. Actually, I think printed paperbacks are still the most easiest accessible media we have, yeah, and actually also the cheapest. We don't need any wires, we don't need any batteries, yeah, we don't need any internet access, nothing. It's really the easiest, and it's wonderful to make annotations, and actually you can use it to throw it on someone, and so there are many other purposes you can think of. And archiving is another issue. The easiest to archive.
And the question here about are writing patterns changing?
Yeah, but still, I think you have to answer that as well, but maybe I do the 3 and then you do the 3 questions?
Okay, I mean, I think we'll try. We might take too long.
We'll try. So the second question was about writing patterns. And you were mentioning some, you're saying people are not able to read longer texts anymore, and the reading habits are changing. But actually, there's not real proof that this is happening. Yeah, this is something, there's a notion that it should be like this because everybody's in the internet and you have Twitter, whatever. But if you look into this, there's no really serious study that proves that these reading patterns are changing. Actually, people are capable of actually reading short texts in the internet, reading a sentence which is 40 pages long. All of this exists at the same time, and I don't have the feeling that one is replacing the other. There are maybe new reading patterns, but one way of reading doesn't replace the other way of reading. In my personal opinion.
You know, my sense is I don't think we can generalize about whether writers are changing their ways of writing because of the availability of technology or because of the facility that certain technological developments give them. I think, yes, for sure, or because they know more about reading and consumption patterns. I think, yes, it is possible that some writers are doing that. They're savvy enough to figure this out and to figure out that short chapters are easier read on the metro or other places that you're writing. So that could be happening. I don't think it's happening across the board because it really depends on what the writer wants to write and how the writer wants to write a lot. One of the things that I have noticed that has happened post-internet and post the availability of so much written material on the internet is plagiarism, is a sloppiness in writing where writers will cut and paste and store bits and pieces without properly storing the source where it's coming from and will then use them in their work. And of course, publishers have tracking softwares, but this has been happening long before the softwares are there, and all of us can't afford those softwares because they're very, very expensive. So then you have to just rely on, you know, your knowledge or typing in the phrase. And I remember coming across once a book by a really well-known historian, and one of her chapters on the partition of India repeated word for word the opening 3 paragraphs from a book of mine. And luckily I wasn't publishing her book, but I was reading it because I was interested, and I thought, oh, this is word for word what I wrote like 3 years back. And I know that she had no intention of plagiarizing it. I know her well enough, so I know what must have happened. Cut, paste, store, use, and don't think about it. I think that is happening with the internet also.
Yeah, piracy is a big issue. Yeah. We could have talked about that another 2 hours. Another thing I want to mention in this context is in Germany we now have a new trend which is using simplified German, simplified language. And actually news are spoken on the radio, some of them in a simplified German. So actually to reach out more people. And now we have the trend that you have books written in an easier German, which doesn't use our complicated grammar. Yeah, which is more using slang expressions to make books more accessible. Though there's always a lot of possibility to reach out to people who are not this much used to reading. Yeah. And I think this is another answer to your question about the many different media forms we have. If you think of Netflix, but if you look into Netflix's own productions, yeah, most of them are based on a book, on a novel. That's quite an interesting thing. And seeing that they put a novel into a series of 12 editions, it's quite nice because, but still, when you talk to people who've read the book and seen the films or the series, they realize that the book actually is a lot more colorful because it's your brain, it's your mind working on it. So all these formats, have the rights of existence at the same time. It's
work
just
with
a
each
different
other.
way of listening to stories, of seeing stories, of reading stories. So you should use all the formats. And in Germany, we're seeing now the rise of audio book streaming. Yeah, it's crazy. Like every week, there's 10% more content available, and people are buying it. Yeah, so.
Okay, next round. So 3 more, sir. You wanted to ask a question? Has it been answered or?
This to you, I mean, Mr. Booth, you said something about the paper form, books in paper. But in what way is the experience of reading a novel on Kindle is inferior to that of reading on paper?
Okay, yes, sir.
Taking forward his question only, in fact, in this iPad, I have hundreds of books, and I enjoy as much as my big library that I had home. Do you think, to preserve our environment, is it not better to have the end of era of paper books? Thank you.
The lady at the back, can you just hand it to her? Yeah, it's coming to you.
Good evening, one and all present here. I'm Nishka Chauhan from LitCam.
Sorry. Can she ask first? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll ask. Sorry, just hold on.
Very quickly, you speak of the danger of self-censorship from writers. Can you speak to self-censorship happening on the part of publishers, particularly in this very polarized political environment and the age of identity politics?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my question is that as a poet, I'm a poet, so I believe that in today's world, female are expected to write a genre. And when we write about fantasies, it is something which is made fun or maybe taken as an invitation. So since very beginning, that is it expected something from female writers? Until when will we see this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So the first question was
Two
on...
questions are both about reading on devices.
Reading on devices. And I have a lot of studies comparing reading on an iPad or reading on a Kindle, yeah, compared to reading on paper. And most of these studies would say it is indeed inferior because it's a different cultural technique. How you read, it's easier to turn the pages, it's easier with annotations. I don't believe anything. You should read the way you like to read, yeah? If you want to read electronic, do it on a Kindle, yeah? If you want to read on paper, it's just your personal way, yeah? And I'm carrying my iPad as well, and I have my books on it, and sometimes I like to read physical books, and when I'm traveling, I download some books, and some books, the only thing for me, it's about archiving. Yeah, I restricted myself now after having had 10,000 of books at my house, now to about 6,000 or so. So every new book I'm getting, another book has to go. Yeah, and I'm having a lot of content electronically. So I don't think there's an inferior on a device. It's about you, the way you like to read.
Let me come to you, respond to your question about whether publishers are self-censoring. The short answer to that, I think, is yes. I mean, I think publishers, certainly I can talk about India, are increasingly worrying whether they're actually self-censoring or not. Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. But they are increasingly worrying about publishing in an growing environment of intolerance of diverse views. And they're worrying because the dangers are very real. We have seen journalists being killed for their views. We have many authors who have had threats against them and who have continued to write, and some who have stopped writing. Some of them have lost their jobs. So it's a very real fear. And I can tell you from my own experience that we have occasionally also had to think about the works that we publish, which earlier I would never have even given a moment's thought to. We've had to think about them because I run a small office which is 85% female. and I worry about the safety of my employees because the threat of violence is so real. So in that sense, but so far, fortunately, we have never not published a political book. All our books are political, and we've never not published something out of that fear. But I would be dishonest if I didn't say that it was in my head all the time. And it does actually worry you, and you think about it all the time, and you think who will stand in solidarity with you, and what should you do, and you see what's happening to other people. So it is something that's around all the time. I think all of us are thinking about it.
Yeah, we're all part of our societies, and if you're a part of a repressive society, you get stuck somehow. On the other hand, usually, if you think there's a text which is so important, I think sometimes you find a way to publish it outside of your country. You get published as an essay instead of a book, yeah. But there is censorship in publishing with authors. It's all with translators as well.
Luckily, they don't think women are that important so far, so we publish about women, so you can stay under the radar a bit. Your question about certain kinds of writing, females are writing that, I don't think that's the case, you know. I think women are writing all kinds of things. I don't think there's any pressure that I know of on women to write only a certain kind of thing. So I don't really know. I don't know, but she's talking about the Indian environment, so I guess you would not, yeah. Okay, we have 3 minutes and 58 seconds. We can maybe take 2 more questions if there are. And yes, here, and one right at the back. That lady in the corner at the back, I can see her waving, and that's it. So can you keep your, can you,
Hi.
That will come to you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get your views on, as a publisher, how would you look at a self-published writer, somebody who's, say, published a book of poems or of short stories, and maybe how do you approach a writer like that? And would you give a second chance to a person like that, or does it, how does it work? Because I have been hearing a lot of people saying that they keep publishing their books. But I've always been of the opinion that, you know, when a publisher publishes it for you, then there is greater credibility and area of interest. So is there a conflict there, or how do you see that?
Okay, and someone, a lady at the back, are you still there? Yes, right at the back. She's raising her hand. The right-hand corner.
I really wanted to congratulate you to bring out a political book like Do You Remember Kunan Poshpura? And it was very, very brave of you to even bring it out, something that has been refuted as journalistic reports, etc. I just wanted to ask you, are there any plans for you to look at that nature of sexual violence against women in other parts of the country, which have fallen prey to political sexual violence?
Okay, short answer to that is yes, we've done a whole series of books, 8 volumes on sexual violence and impunity, on the structures that make for impunity for sexual violence in 5 countries. And the book you're talking about, thank you for saying that. We did face some repercussions on that, but I don't want to talk about them in public. I'll tell you if you want to know. But we took the responsibility for it. We thought it was an important book to do, and we will not hesitate from publishing books on sexual violence. We have to address that serious issue in our country.
I need to add that I really admire your work and yourself as a person. I think you're a role model for publishers worldwide.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you. This session is supposed to be about him, not me. So thank you, Juergen. And I think for your question, I think there is a conflict, of course, between self-publishing and being published by a publisher, but I think it's the democratization of knowledge and publishing and all of that, that people are self-publishing. When you have a self-published book, I don't think a publisher will then pick it up because it's already been in the market. But it's possible, sometimes it may happen that they'll pick it up, but it's entirely possible that, as Juergen said, a self-published book will draw the attention of the publisher to something and they may come back to you. So it can help, but it can also be something which is a bit of a holdback. Do you want to add to that?
No, I agree completely.
You agree
I always agree completely with you.
Okay, so I think we're out of time. We've got 33 seconds, so we can close in time. If you're wondering how I know so precisely, there's a monitor here with the seconds ticking away that tells you. Thank you all very much for listening, Juergen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.